Hey everyone, I'm Ms. Milkowski, the mathematician, and today we are going to talk about radicals. All right, so let's say I want to simplify the square root of -8 plus the square root of -2. Okay, so first of all, there's nothing I can do, right off the bat to simplify because these aren't the same. It's not like I had 3 root 2 plus 5 root 2, right? So I need to make sure the radicals match before I can even add them or subtract them if that's what I was being asked to do. So let me rewrite it right here first, okay? All right, and then another problem we have is they are negative, so we have to remedy that situation as well. So what are we going to do when we have negative radicals? Well, I want to remind you of a property of radicals, which says that the square root of a times b equals the square root of a times the square root of b, all right? So if I can somehow break each one of these up into, a and b, let's say, I can simplify it, but I can also deal with the negative if I make either a or b -1. All right, so this is what I mean. We have -8, all right, but I could write -8 as -1 times 8, right? That's another way to write it. So what if I do that? What if I write it as -1 times 8? So let me just erase this here. So I'm going to rewrite, so I should probably put this over here. So I'm going to rewrite -8 as -1 times 8. Okay, and so then I'm just going to use it with radicals. So I'm going to rewrite the square root of -8 as the square root of -1 times the square root of 8, right? Because that's I'm just rewriting -8 as -1 times 8, and I can think of it as the square root of -1 times the square root of 8, all right? And then I can do the same with -2, okay? So I can rewrite -2 as -1 times 2. Okay, so I'm going to just rewrite that as the square root of -1 times the square root of 2. Okay, now something that's awesome that you can remember, that you probably remember, and if you don't, that's okay, I'll just tell you. The square root of -1 is I. That's right. I'll put it over here. I equals the square root of -1. Okay, so all we're going to do is wherever we see a square root of -1, we're going to replace it with an I. So this just becomes I times the square root of 8 plus I times the square root of 2. All right, so we're making progress. We're in a better spot now because we no longer have negatives underneath that radical. And now we just have to, again, we still can't add because we've got square root of 8 and square root of 2, and they're not the same. So square root of 2 is as simplified as it's going to be. There's nothing I can do. But what about the square root of 8? So this is something that I've done in other videos, is I've written the number underneath the radical as a product of its prime factors. So if you click up over there, you can see a video where I do it in a little more detail. But another way to write 8, the way to write 8 as a product of its prime factors is 2 times 2 times 2, right? And then we have plus I root 2. Now, because it's square root, that means for every pair I have, I circle it, cross it out, and bring 1 outside. Okay, so I had 2 2's, so I circled it, crossed it out, and brought a 2 outside. All right, so then it's 2 times I times the square root of 2, because that's all that's left inside. So 2I root 2. And then I have plus I root 2. Awesome. All right, now I'm in a good spot because I got the root 2, and the I and the I, so I can combine them. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to do something just as a placeholder because I think it'll make it easier. So actually, I'm not going to change colors because I'm going to use colors for something else. I'm going to put a 1 in front of this I, right? Because there is really a 1 there. We just don't write it when it's 1, right? We don't write 1x, we write x, right? Well, I think maybe in the middle grades, you can put a 1 there to help you understand how to do it. Some teachers then don't mind. And I don't mind either if you're doing it, but I don't want you submitting an answer as 1x. I'd want it as x, okay? So I'm going to put a 1 right here. I'm sorry, this is not the greatest 1 in the world. All right, there's a 1 there, okay? And there's a reason I'm doing this, because this looks kind of messy, and I have a lot of kids that have trouble simplifying because they think it looks too complicated, but it's quite easy, okay? So I want you to think of the numbers in front, okay? So 2 and 1. Okay, so this is 2I root 2, this is 1I root 2, okay? And we're going to add them. So I want you to listen carefully to my voice. Ready? 2I root 2 plus 1I root 2 is, and you're going to say 3, right? 3I root 2. Very good. So 3I root 2. Awesome. Okay, and I use that intonation because sometimes things can get really messy. It could be like x squared yzq, right? So if you have 10 x squared yzq plus 12 x squared yzq, right? That's just going to be 10 plus 12, which is 22 x squared yzq. Okay, so always kind of think about that. Say what's the same. Okay, I can underline what's the same right here, or circle it. I root 2, I root 2. So then all we're doing is we're dealing with what's in front. 2 plus 1, which is 3, and then I root 2. Perfect. So there you go. Hey everyone, I'm Ms. Milkowski, the mathematician, and I hope you found that last video helpful. If you have any questions or if there are any topics you'd like to see me cover in future videos, definitely let me know in the comments below. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'm going to leave you with the most important piece of advice I can give you, which is when you're doing mathematics, always ask why.